Stories is how we make sense of our world. It's our operating system. Individuals, it decides the kind of actions we want to take, how we see the world. We use graphic novels, comic books to create anti-Bin Ladens, anti-Zarqawis, positive heroes, real role models that the kids can aspire to learn from. Well, my work focuses on countering violent extremism, narratives and mythology, and preventing the youth from joining these extremist groups. And I use heroism as an antidote to extremism. Teaching the kids that, you know, you can take your own trauma, your own grievance, and turn it into a source of healing, a source of empowerment, a gift that can actually empower you in life rather than bring you down. Teach the kids tolerance. Teach the kids that, you know what, it's okay to have a different view. It's okay to be a different color. It's okay to be a different sex. Teach the kids that misogyny is not okay. Teach the kids that, you know what, there are female heroes as well that take up the fight against extremism.
And female heroes are forbidden?
Well, it's a touchy subject, obviously, in the Middle East. So one of the comic books I did is called Section 9. It's based on a real life unit in Jordan. It's a counterterrorism unit that's all female, and they're active in the field. So not a lot of people know about it. I trained with them for a week actually, and it was amazing. It was fascinating, and I thought, wow, you know, what a story for a graphic novel. And you hit several birds with one stone again. One, it's counterterrorism. It's a great counterterrorism narrative. Two, great story about female empowerment, and I want to change the view of women in the young boys' minds. I want them to look at women as not a source of embarrassment or shame, destroyers of honor like it is in our honor myth, but rather, you know, they can be equal, they can be leaders, they can be beautiful, they can be smart, they can be tactical and dangerous if they have to be, just like any other man. And I think there's a very powerful message there. The kids loved it. Unfortunately, certain people in our government didn't. And it's not that it's a government policy. It's it's quite the opposite. The government actually is all about women empowerment because they realize that's partially the answer to our economic problems. The problem is the mentality. You have some decision makers who truly believe that this is not a woman's role to be in that kind of position. They cannot accept women in leadership jobs. So, you know, we're challenging very, very deeply rooted narratives and misogynistic narratives and beliefs using these comic books. But, you know, one step at a time, one story at a time, we'll get there. People need to understand the Middle East is an honor-based culture. And for all the Trekkies and the geeks out there, if you want to understand the honor culture in the Middle East, think of the Klingons. That is our culture. It is a good day to die is a very popular quote in the Arab world. We raise our kids, we were raised at a young age, you know, that to be honorable, and part of being honorable is to have an honorable death. Die as a warrior, die for a good cause. And it's a very thin line when you raise your kids with one foot in the grave from dying for a good cause or blowing yourself up in a market. And another big problem is, you know, somehow the honor code, a beautiful honor code that's been there for centuries, got twisted over the last 100, 200 years, and it became more honorable to die than it is to live for something. One of the most destructive narratives in our culture, in the honor narrative, in the honor system that we have, is that women are the destroyers of honor and men are the generators of honor. Men and women believe this. Women believe this in our culture. And this is the root cause of all misogyny and all social violence towards women. If you believe a woman is the source of your shame, what do you know about shame psychologically speaking? The root cause of all violence, especially social violence, socially driven violence. When you consider somebody a source of your shame and I project my shame upon you, I dehumanize you, you're no longer equal, and all of a sudden now I'm more likely to commit an act of violence towards you to diminish my feelings of shame, replace it with pride. So it created a toxic situation in my culture where, and by the way, we see the same thing in the United States, where misogyny becomes a projection of masculinity. So imagine coming and telling kids, be heroes, with that very dangerous narrative. All of a sudden, heroism is going to becoming more violent towards women, more manly. And that's what we have in the Middle East. People feel more manly, and all of a sudden their manhood depends on how they interact with women and how they dominate their sexual behavior. It's no coincidence that every time an extremist group goes to a village or a town, the very first thing they do, ban women from using Facebook, stone women, do this, you can't do that, you can't get out of the house. That's misogyny at work. So it's incredibly important to address the narratives. We need heroism based on narratives of hope, resilience, connection to others, based on female and male heroes.
We have those problems in the States a little bit too, right? With the 9/11 narrative. And if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about your story of forgiveness, I would say there. I think it's really inspiring.
Sure, absolutely. So one, in the United States, shortly after 9/11 happened, my father calls me early in the morning before I realized anything had happened. And he's like, Suleiman, if anybody asks you your name, tell them your name is Jose and you're from Mexico. And obviously he was worried about me. A few months later, I got attacked by 4 guys on campus. And for no other reason other than being an Arab. And then it really hit me later on while I was trying to process what happened. That those guys had one story, one narrative about Middle Easterns, Arabs, Muslims, whatever, or whoever they perceive to be Muslim. Because one thing about racism is ignorant. And then I realized, they had one narrative of 9/11. It's no wonder they attacked me. So I thought, what if they had different narratives, different stories? What if they had different interactions at a younger age with people from my culture? Maybe then they would have realized that not all of us are Bin Laden, that Bin Laden is like the KKK in my country. So I started going to school children ages 6 and 7, talking to them about Middle Eastern culture, spreading a message of tolerance. And then a 6-year-old girl stands up, she's like, Suleiman, I have a question. I'm like, what's your question? She's like, is there an Arabic Barbie? And the boys go crazy. Is there an Arab Superman? Is there an Arab Batman? And I'm like, you know what, there isn't. And I couldn't get the idea in my head. One thing led to another, dropped out of my master's program, went back to the Middle East, started working on developing these comic books, these stories. And in 2010, 2011, we sold and published 1.2 million comics. We stopped afterwards due to lack of funding, censorship, and so on. But we're hoping to get back into the game soon. We cannot afford not to, because we see the cost of doing nothing, the cost of not providing the youth with positive role models. It's ISIS.
Have you seen a change since, I guess, in the last decade with the internet, that social discourse has grown in Jordan?
Well, absolutely. Not just Jordan, the entire Arab world, I think. YouTube, the biggest people who consume YouTube in the world are in Saudi Arabia. 40% of Saudis uploaded a YouTube video. I think Jordan has one of the highest penetration rates of Facebook in the world. You've seen Twitter and what happened during the Arab Spring. So obviously, and part of the reason is there's no physical space to have this kind of freedom to share information, to express your opinion. So people are resorting to, social media and these virtual networks. What's scary is that the extremists are incredibly adept at using social networks, media, and the internet in spreading their message. It's not that they're geniuses at it and they're like use some special techniques. No, they're doing it, and the governments, and there's nobody else in that space. I mean, yes, you hear small voices here and there, but there's no real powerful network, let's say, of voices that can actually go and engage the youth. Right now, I'll be coordinating with an activist in Jordan who I just met recently. He's bringing, for example, imams from different mosques, moderate imams, helping them, teaching them how to get engaged on social media so they can engage with the youth, talk to them with the youth, provide an alternative to the crazy imams that ISIS push on social media. And you know what? Governments cannot operate in real time, especially in the Middle East. It's a lost cause. I think their role is enabling people like me, people like those activists in the field, creating more of us even, and help us fill the gap where they can't operate.
Many young kids spend time pretending, and they play cowboy, spy, fireman, ballerina. Do kids in Jordan, what do they pretend to be?
Well, when I was growing up, we played a lot with hide and seek, all these kind of games. But nowadays, we're seeing something a bit more dangerous. Some videos have been popping up online all over the Arab world of youth I believe the videos were from Egypt and Yemen, maybe, the second one. Youth playing ISIS. They're reenacting some beheading videos. Instead of playing cops and robbers, they're playing ISIS. It's the cool thing now. And that is incredibly dangerous. I tell people, of course it's scary. In large parts of the world, people grew up on Harry Potter, Frozen, Star Wars, The Matrix. And some parts of the Arab world, they're growing up on ISIS. That's their heroes. And you're going to emulate your heroes. There was an interview several months ago with one of the intellectual leaders for ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And he said in the interview, he's like, look, we're probably going to end up losing in the next 5-10 years, eventually, militarily-wise, on the ground. But he's like, that's not our goal. He's like, jihadi ideology and narratives have gone global and mainstream now. That is our goal. This is a 100-year-old war. We're not going to see our victory. Maybe my children, his grandchildren, they're in this for the long haul, and they see the value of spreading those narratives. This illustrates that we have some deeply held narratives in our culture that we really need to change. All the laws in the world, if you don't change those narratives, you're not going to change anything on the ground. The grand vision is to be able to create the Arab Disney and create all these, a hero industrial complex, where we can create a generation that's capable of generating their own heroes, where I don't need to create characters anymore, the kids do it on their own. That's the ultimate vision.